What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Vanguard Live. This is our fifth live stream of the week. We're staying productive. We're bringing you guys the news, the most vital information. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. It's going to be a great show today. How you doing, Zach?
Yeah, 5 timers club, not just 5 episodes this week, 5 episodes in a row. Very rare for the Vanguard. So, hats off to us, break our spine, patting ourselves on the back. No, yeah, going to be another really good show today. I think, and as always, like to kick the show off with a big shout out to the Patreon community over here, our Vanguardians, our comrades, all you lovely folks that keep the wheels on our van going round and round.
Absolutely. Huge shout out to the Patreon community. Huge shout out to everyone that's tuning in. Make sure to hit that like button if you are just tuning in. Great way to support the show 100% for free. And shout out to you, Adi, for the first super chat of the live stream. 5 times guard. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Adi. And by the way, wanted to let you know, Adi, that we, at least I don't know what Zach ate for dinner last night, but I enjoyed a delicious vegan meal of plant-based Frankfurters field roast brand. Highly recommend the field roast brand to anyone out there that's looking for some meat alternatives. They make great like plant-based sausages, hot dogs, stuff like that. So thank you so much for the super chats yesterday, Adi. We really appreciate that. And just wanted to let you know that I did in fact eat vegan last night.
Yeah, I had 4 beers for dinner, so I also ate vegan last night, Audie. Shout out to you.
A liquid dinner, absolutely. But yeah, thanks so much for the support on Patreon, you guys. Really appreciate that. The link's in the description if you'd like to join our patron community. If you enjoy our show, if you enjoy our perspective as commentators, then it really does help out to support the show on Patreon. The link's in the description. As I said, hit it up. But yeah, huge sincere shout out to our patrons. You guys make this show possible. So whether or not you love us or hate us, you can thank the patrons because, again, we wouldn't be around without their support. So shout out to you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Got a lot of stuff to pick over for the day. Did you have something in mind that you wanted to kick the show off with?
We got a couple good stories to go over today. We got some Cenk versus Jimmy stuff. We should probably wait on that one for a few more comrades to trickle in. What else do we have to talk about today? Joe Rogan, John Fetterman. I guess we could talk a little. We could start off by talking a little bit about the Breaking Points segment about John Fetterman, if that sounds cool to you.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well. Let's dive right in there. Let's start off with a little bit of some genuine substance for once in our lives. Over here at the TMZ guard, the Lib guard over here, going to be breaking down some electoralism. Gosh, the sheep herd guard at it again. But yeah, I think this is an interesting debate. It's not one that I was particularly expecting, but I thought that it was definitely worth investigating because clearly, even though I will argue that I disagree with Saagar, that's a sentiment that is starting to really catch on with people that, in the aftermath of this stroke, John Fetterman is not like fit to be in office, and I'll let Saagar make his own case. I don't want to like belittle it before we let the guy speak. But that's just something that I think has really like taken footing as one of the first attacks against John Fetterman. And it's like, if this is all you've got against the guy, I think that just illustrates how strong of a candidate it was. Kind of like how if all you could go after Bernie Sanders for was that he'd had a heart attack and whatever, yada, yada, yada. It's like, yeah, that shows how pretty ironclad his policy and his messaging is. But anyway, I thought this was a good discussion. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is a really good discussion. And obviously the Pennsylvania Senate race between Dr. Oz and John Fetterman, the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, is one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting one going on. In my opinion, it's especially interesting because you're pitting more of a populist progressive and John Fetterman against just the definition of elitism in Dr. Oz. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this one shapes out. For a while, John Fetterman had a massive lead over Dr. Oz. It looked like it was a sure thing that he would win. However, Oz has closed the gap a little bit. And now I think it's about a 6 or 7 point difference, which separates these candidates. So it really could go either way, knowing how the polling has recently undercounted Republican support. I think it's going to be a real nail biter, guys. I think it's going to be a real coin toss of a race. And it really is unfortunate that John Fetterman had to have this health emergency event right when it really mattered most, right before he won the nomination and then went on into the general. So again, this has definitely added a curveball to the race, the whole stroke issue. And I thought that this debate on breaking points between Krystal and Saagar was a good discussion about what the, how much this actually matters as far as candidates go. So yeah, let's take a listen here. This is a good one.
Let's get to this little controversy involving John Fetterman, who, of course, is the Democratic nominee for the Senate in Pennsylvania. This is a key race. He's up against Dr. Oz, the Republican. And Fetterman's still in the average of polls. Let's actually go ahead and put the second piece up here on the screen. The
D2, guys.
D2.
Yeah.
He actually does still hold about a 6-point lead here. But he used to have a wider lead. Most of the analysts believe that, things were likely to narrow anyway. And also, Oz has really been hitting him with a lot of ads on crime that seem to be having an effect. But the other component of this race is, of course, the fact that Fetterman is recovering from a stroke. And, has been fairly open about the fact he's recovering from a stroke. He pulled back from doing many public events, many interviews. He's only doing one debate, fairly close to when the election ultimately is. He's talked about how, you can tell in his speech that it's not all come back. It's obvious. He's talked about how he has a lot of auditory processing issues where he has to have closed captioning to be able to really understand what questions are being asked and then the context of the conversation. So all of that is ongoing and very open question over how voters are going to feel about that as they head into the polls. So, and one of his first big sit-down interviews since the stroke, he sat down with a reporter for NBC News. And there was this one part of it, of something she said about what her interactions were like with John Fetterman that has proved to be very controversial. Let's take a listen to that.
We had a monitor set up so that he could read my questions because he still has lingering auditory processing issues as a result of the stroke, which means he has a hard time understanding what he's hearing. Now, once he reads the question, he's able to understand. You'll hear he also still has some problems, some challenges with speech. And I'll say, Katie, that just in some of the small talk prior to the interview, before the closed captioning was up and running, it did seem that he had a hard time understanding our conversation.
Okay, so this was seized on by some right-wing outlets and by the Republican Party. They clipped on that part and were sharing this. And this provoked a huge, huge outcry saying basically it was inappropriate.
At her.
At the reporter.
Yeah.
It was inappropriate for her to say this, that it was ableist, et cetera. And I'll tell you my opinion, then I want to hear from you because I know you had a strong reaction to this as well.
Very strong.
I didn't honestly understand the freak out in either direction. I am not a person who thinks that it should be off limits to talk about people's health, cognitive abilities. I mean, we've talked about this a lot with President Biden,
Feinstein,
Trump, with Feinstein, all these people. They are auditioning to be public servants. I think it is completely on the table to have this discussion. I didn't think it was inappropriate what she said at all. I also didn't see it as this great gotcha that the right sort of wanted to portray it as, because he has said very clearly, I need the closed captioning. I have trouble, with auditory processing. You can see if you watch the interview, he's clearly capable of understanding what's being asked and formulating cogent responses. He just needs the closed captioning. So I was like, he said he needs the closed captioning. You're saying he needs the closed captioning. That's perfectly consistent with how he's portrayed things.
So I think if we had locked it in there, I would completely agree.
Yeah.
It's the outrage at her, which is driving me insane, because the smear campaign, which has been directed at that interviewer, Dasha Burns, is outrageous. They are attacking her as some anti-disability, ableist, activist. Did she say anything about you shouldn't vote for the guy?
And also, I will agree with Saagar that it's pretty ridiculous to go after that specific newscaster for just, recounting her experience. If that was her experience with John Fetterman, then I think it's fair for her to, recount that experience. If that's what she experienced, then feel free to say that. I don't think that's ableist to point out. That being said, a lot of the discourse surrounding this whole John Fetterman stroke and his need for closed captioning, this whole debacle, I do think that a lot of the discourse surrounding it has been tinged with some pretty undeniable elements of ableism. Because if you guys watch John Fetterman in these interviews interacting with journalists who are asking him questions, he's really doing a perfectly fine job. Like, the way that some people are talking about it would have you believe it's like he's stuttering and can't get out a single word and can't understand anything. Like, no, he actually seems pretty capable of holding a conversation and answering questions. He just needs the closed captioning. So I just don't really understand the implication from some of his critics. It's like, are disabled people not allowed to serve in the Senate? Can they not be politicians if you need to look at closed captioning? Like, is that really a criteria for being a public servant? I don't think so. I think that people that have disabilities are 100% able to serve in those kind of roles. So again, it's not ableist to question John Fetterman's health conditions and to talk about the stroke, or to, talk about an experience you had with him like Dana Bash did. But I will say that a lot of the discourse surrounding this, obviously mostly coming from the right wing and the Dr. Oz camp, has heavily been tinged with ableism.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, right? Because sure, you could take this, like, this was definitely like an innocuous fucking thing. I don't think she had any intention of like demeaning John Fetterman. No, she was reporting on her experience, kind of like we said. But yeah, the idea that just because somebody needs closed captioning is somewhat like concerning about them being fit to serve office is something that I take real issue with, and that's one of the reasons why I just don't understand this being an issue. Like, let's say somebody is deaf, right? They're a member of the deaf community and they want to run for office. Well, guess what? That means they're going to have somebody doing ASL whenever they're communicating with people who don't know ASL, right? Does that mean that person is somehow like, unfit to be a leader in the Senate? No, in fact, it would be based to have somebody from the disabled community actually represent them in the Senate and be able to pass meaningful legislation. God knows we need that in this country. So it feels really weird. And then on top of that, you're dealing with the fact that he's running against an actual doctor who's supposed to have like a code of ethics when you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with like a health crisis. And instead, he's just fucking going head first into it, talking about how, oh, if you like stammer, like, again, like stammering, that has absolutely nothing to do with your like cognitive ability to process thought. A lot of people who are really, really smart throughout history have had stammers, right? This is just a well-known fact. So even if this was permanent where he would like stammer when he was up on stage, like, okay, let's have this 6'8" like based guy up there, like, go ahead and say, yeah, fuck all of you, I can still do this with a stammer. It doesn't impact or impair his ability to lead this country at all. FDR, one of the most renowned presidents of all time, was in a wheelchair. Did that somehow impede his ability to lead? No, it didn't. So anyway.
Also, shout out to you, Brian. Really appreciate the $4.99 from you. There's a Green Party candidate in the Pennsylvania race. Fetterman is not the only choice for leftists in the state. That's good to know, Brian. I actually wasn't aware of that. So that is pretty cool that the Green Party got a candidate on the ballot in Pennsylvania. Thanks for letting us know about that, man.
Yeah, I think they also have another party that I know nothing about because I saw the ballot, like from somebody that got their like mail-in ballot and posted it on Twitter. And there's also a party called the Keystone Party, which I know literally nothing about. But if anybody does in the chat, let us know about the Keystone Party in Pennsylvania. I don't know if they're like left, right, center, or like corporate, whatever.
When I hear Keystone, I just think of the Keystone Pipeline. I'm like, is that like the big oil energy company party? Anyway, thank you so much, Brian. Really appreciate the super chat, and that is good to know. I'll have to look more into who that candidate is and what his platform is. Oops, I didn't mean to leave the video. Let's quickly jump over here and keep watching because this does get a little bit spicy, guys.
Because he needed closed captionings. Is that what she said? No. She reported the truth, which is he seems to have trouble understanding what I'm saying without closed captioning. That's up to you in order to consider that. By the way, I actually do think it's a huge problem. You could say otherwise because he is not forthright about his medical condition.
No, I don't agree with that at all.
Well,
I mean,
Krystal, he's only saying that he has trouble with auditory processing. He refuses to say whether he has problem with his cognition and will not release his medical records.
He's said very clearly.
Yeah.
I mean, he's released things from his doctor that have said, and you can tell from the interview, he doesn't have any problem with cognitively like responding to it. He says, I have trouble when processing, from an auditory perspective. I need the closed captioning. I don't think that's an issue. And frankly, I also don't think that it's been an issue for voters either. He has been upfront about that. So that's why when I look at this, I'm like, what's the gotcha? She's saying he needs the closed captioning. He's saying, I need the closed captioning. I actually appreciate that he's been like candid about that and hasn't been trying to hide that he is in the process of recovering.
Well, I just disagree because he refuses to release his most updated medical records. And the fact is that he could have had cognition problems and we have no idea. Like until a medical doctor says it.
He's submitting himself to interviews so we can see that he doesn't have cognition problems. I mean, he actually just.
I mean, whenever he's replacing words and can't place things correctly.
You also have to be like, you also have to be even-handed here. I mean, he just sat for a big editorial interview with the Philadelphia Inquirer that Dr. Oz is unwilling to do.
Mm-hmm.
So he's actually subjecting himself to more public scrutiny than Dr. Oz is in terms of what his views are and how he would handle these things. So like the freak out about he needs to be more transparent. No, to me, he's sitting for these interviews. This is not the only one that he did. He's done a bunch of them. He has submitted himself to much more mainstream sort of press inquiry and transparency than ultimately Dr. Oz has. So I think that's a very unfair characterization.
See, I'm not going to say that Oz shouldn't.
Can we just jump in and talk about how this dude's about to do a live debate with Dr. Oz on Tuesday? Like, the people are going to get to make up their minds. Like, this idea that he's like nefariously like hiding his medical records when he's had his doctors put out multiple statements, with their, medical opinion and all of their credibility on the line to say this about it. Like, what is the implication here that he's like somehow got shoddy doctors that are hiding information from the public, or that he's like nefariously like hiding the fact that he's like lost the 100 IQ points as a result of his stroke? Like, what is the accusation here? It just doesn't make any sense. Like, I think Saagar's really just painting with a broad brush. He sees a guy who has like a slight disability and he just assumes that it's cognitive, which is the most frustrating thing for people who have like speech impediments or any kind of like verbal disability, because your brain and cognitive function is fine, but you sound like it's not. Like, I used to work with this guy, let's call him fucking Jonathan, and he would get so pissed off because he had like a real fucking bad stammer, and like every 30 seconds when he would talk he would like fucking stammer really bad, but it had absolutely nothing to do with like his fucking brain function, right? It was just like that's how he was. So I don't know, but constantly people would just think that he was like like
do the interview. What I'm saying is that you can't rule out cognition problems unless a doctor says so. He refuses to release his medical records that say it to the otherwise. This is one of 100 jobs in the world. It's a tremendously important job. And frankly, like saying that a guy who has very obvious brain damage, and that's literally what this is, you can ask Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who did a whole segment on this. That's a real issue. I mean, this is a very important job. It requires a lot of stress.
Yeah, but again, I actually think it's more important to know what your stances are on issues and how you would vote. And that's what Oz has shielded himself from having to answer any real hard questions on, because he knows that the piece on abortion in particular is very uncomfortable. So like the outrage about Fetterman, who is out here subjecting himself to public scrutiny, in a very transparent manner, seems completely out of step with the treatment of Dr. Oz, who's allowed to not sit for these interviews, not subject himself to press inquiry, and like gets a pass. I don't, I just don't agree with that.
I'm not going to give Dr. Oz a pass either.
Yeah.
He should sit down for an interview. And he's not doing it because he's also scared of his position on abortion. Like, let's be very.
Yeah, that's obviously what's happening here.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing, and I think we probably disagree on the politics of this as well. Like, the polls have tightened in this race, something that we expected would happen all along. It's Pennsylvania. No candidate was going to win this state by 10 points.
Right.
That was just never going to be realistic. But I don't think it's the stroke recovery thing that's been an issue for him. I honestly don't think that voters care that much about this stuff. I mean, we saw this with Biden as well. Like, they took a look at this guy. They're like, clearly he's slowing down. But you know what? I still prefer him over Donald Trump ultimately. I honestly think it's been the ads hitting him on being quote unquote soft on crime that has been much more effective. So I'm not sure it's even a smart strategy. In fact, I don't think it is a smart strategy for Republicans.
I actually agree with that. If anything, I feel like this is all just making John Fetterman look more sympathetic. Like, people now feel bad for him because he's just clearly trying to recover from a stroke in a very public manner. Most people, when they're recovering from a massive medical emergency, don't have to do it under this kind of scrutiny in this public way. So if anything, I feel like this is making making John Fetterman look more sympathetic, and kind of just making Dr. Oz and his team look like dicks, because they're out here like pointing at a disabled person who's in the process of recovering from a stroke, which, by the way, probably a lot of Americans can relate to. I mean, I know people that have had strokes, or I know people that have had strokes. You know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't a terribly irregular thing to happen here in America, especially because we're one of the, most unhealthy countries in the world. This is a fairly regular experience. If anything, this might normalize Fetterman to your average Pennsylvanian. So I agree that it's not necessarily the best political strategy, although obviously we'll have to wait to see how that turns out at the voting booths.
Yeah, I think it's it's a massive indictment, first off, of our polling, that this guy like is appearing to be like 6 or 7 points ahead, and we're still like, no, he might not eke it out. We're so bad at guessing this that we think it might swing it like massively far in the other direction. So it's really hard to know what is and isn't really impacting him. I would agree that it's probably the crime. I also think it's just really fucking hard to win people over as a Democrat right now, given the state of affairs in this country, how the economy is going. When you have a really lackluster president like Joe Biden, who is the party that's in office, it's always harder to like flip a purple seat like he would be trying to do in Pennsylvania, like a coin toss kind of a state. But yeah, anyway, I think it does make him also more. I don't know. It makes Dr. Oz look like even more of a dick, because the guy is literally called Dr. Oz and he's making fun of somebody for a medical condition. Like, you can't get more like comic book evil than that.
Also, on the crime note, Krystal said like she thinks that the crime ads are hurting Fetterman more. John Fetterman should respond to that. Be like, you think I'm soft on crime? I'm the motherfucker that literally apprehended a jogger with a shotgun because I thought he was a criminal. Like, you think I'm a fucking softy, bitch? Yeah.
That's one of my two main beefs with John Fetterman. I don't fuck with vigilante justice, even if you're the mayor.
Yeah, and thank you, by the way, so much, Bowen757 Pilot. Really appreciate the generous $20 super chat. Good points, Zach, regarding his disability. You both and everyone have a great weekend. Well, thank you so much, Bowen. We really appreciate that, as always, and you have a great weekend yourself, man.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bowen. Have a great weekend, and always appreciate seeing you in the chat.
Yeah, thanks so much, and let's keep watching this. Almost done.
Republicans to really hone in on this component as their main line of attack against Fetterman versus, some of the things that they've gotten traction with.
Well, that I agree. I mean, look at the data. How many ads are they running about his brain damage? Like, none. How many ads are they running about crime? All of them. So I'm only looking at this in the vacuum of the people who are basically trying to smear this poor woman for just doing her job. I would have appreciated seeing this for Dianne Feinstein, for Strom Thurmond. This is the problem, which is that we have these, quote, norms where we're supposed to just bow to whoever these quote unquote disability activists are and not actually and accurately describe people's mental. If you want to vote for him, be my guest. Me personally, I already had hangups about Fetterman, so I'm already biased, right?
Right.
I'm trying to put myself in a position.
Look,
somebody who I really liked and had brain damage. Honestly, I don't think I would vote for them.
To me, what his positions are on, healthcare, drug prices, marijuana legalization, there's a million things that he supports, which are much more in step with my views. And I think that's the way that most voters ultimately look at this. And also, saying brain damage, it might be technically true, but it's also very loaded. You can see he's subjecting himself to these interviews. You can see he is able to very clearly articulate what he thinks on all of these various things, which is more than you can say for Dr. Oz at this point. So you're right. I think it would be right for Feinstein and, Biden and a lot of other people besides who are 85 years old and a lot of questions about how they're hanging in there. It would be definitely better and appropriate if they were mandated to subject themselves to this kind of public scrutiny. It'd be better if Herschel Walker, subjected himself to this kind of public scrutiny. It'd be better if Dr. Oz subjected himself to this kind of public scrutiny. So I don't think it's fair to attack Fetterman for doing the thing that we actually want him to do. I did think the criticism of this reporter was completely over the top. But I also don't think it should be disqualifying. Me personally, I don't think it should be disqualifying if you need closed captioning. Like if you're hard, there are a lot of people who are hard of hearing. There are a lot of people who are deaf who might struggle with.
I don't think
that it's hard to have like an accommodation to have closed captioning doesn't seem like a big deal to me. And if it doesn't exist, it should exist because people who are deaf or hard of hearing should not be shut out of public office just because they have trouble, reading lips or understanding what's going on without having that accommodation.
Totally. Look, if it's only closed captioning, fine. But look, there's a lot of questions and he's much more at risk of having another stroke. You never know. As I understand it, with these events, it can also lead to follow on brain events. All I'm saying is you can't rule out the cognition. And I think that's a problem.
But again, he is subjecting himself to more scrutiny. and more transparency about what he actually thinks and his ability to perform than anyone else. So yeah, voters ultimately, like, they get to decide what they think about it, but I think he should be applauded for actually subjecting. He could have not done this interview very easily and would have gotten it. No one could have even really said much about it, since Oz is not subjecting himself to these interviews either. He could have just stayed quiet. He could have tried to hide the reality of, you know, how his stroke recovery is proceeding. So I think he deserves to be applauded for having this level of transparency.
I'm glad he sat down for the interview. I actually do wonder, I'm curious what you think, whether it was the pressure for him not wanting to debate and not having done interviews in the past as to why he did it in the first place. I wonder whether he wanted to show strength and like his ability, or whether he felt compelled to do this or whether he wanted to do this.
I think they've decided as a political strategy that the best thing to do is just be upfront.
Yeah.
And I think that they're correct about that, because if he was in hiding and not doing interviews and not being upfront about the fact, like, hey, I need closed captioning, you know, for the debate, and I need closed captioning for these interviews, and he did a couple podcast interviews where I needed the same thing, I think it would actually fuel this direction more, because it would raise more questions, then you could paint whatever portrait you wanted to paint. So I think with a lot of attacks, not just with regards to health, but a lot of things, the best thing you can do is just be upfront about, like, yeah, this is what happened, or this is where I am, or this is how I'm feeling. And then it takes some of the teeth out of the attack. I will also say that he raised like $1 million in a day after this interview, because there was so much like backlash and controversy around it and whatever. But, you know, I think generally speaking, obviously it'd be better for him politically if he hadn't had a stroke and didn't have to answer these questions and could focus on his positions and his critique of Oz and all of those things. But, you know, I think he's sort of taken the best possible political strategy of being candid about how things are going that he possibly could.
Yeah, I want to see how he does in the debate. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country.
So, like I said, interesting debate there. And speaking of the upcoming John Fetterman versus Dr. Oz debate, I think Zach and I will be doing live coverage of that here on the Vanguard. So make sure to tune in. You said next Tuesday, right? Yeah, Tuesday. Make sure to tune into the Vanguard Tuesday, because we're going to be breaking that down. And as Saagar referenced, that'll be the real test of Fetterman's cognitive abilities. If he's able to hold his own in a live debate like that, I think that'll be really telling about where he's at cognitively.
Absolutely. But do you want to go ahead and get down into the muck of the show?
Yeah, let's dive right into the gutter, as they like to say. So we got a little bit of Jimmy Dore versus Cenk Uygur beef going on Twitter. This one popped off last night, and Jimmy responded to Cenk this morning. So here's the original tweet that started it all. Pretty standard take from Cenk Uygur. You see a lot of this kind of rhetoric from Cenk. He says there are plenty of disagreements on the left, but one easy way to know who's not on the left is if they tell you that Tulsi Gabbard, Jimmy Dore, and Glenn Greenwald are true leftists. Usually followed by how Trump is for peace and AOC is for war. So again, you kind of see this tweet from Cenk Uygur a lot. He loves to express this sentiment about, like, these are the fake leftists and I'm the real leftist, and et cetera, et cetera. Jimmy Dore responded and says, in this video, Cenk Uygur, the always pro-war union buster who took $24 million from right-wingers and DNC donors and featured revenge porn and upskirt pics of celebrities for money on his show, is smearing Julian Assange as a Trumper who cannot be trusted. So let's take a quick listen here to the clip that Jimmy Dore is referencing. I think this was from like 2016, 2017 era. But yeah, here's what Cenk said about Assange.
Well, obviously it's hard to tell who's telling the truth here. But lately, I have to confess that WikiLeaks has not had an astounding record. You know, the way that Assange seems to be backing Donald Trump over and over and over again, it makes me very seriously question Assange's efforts to actually be a journalist and not to be a partisan. And I get it. I get why he hates the Democrats. They're trying to put him in prison. Okay,
right. But
at the same time,
so are Republicans. Let's be clear about that.
And now the Republicans are too, and they have been in the past. But it seems like Assange has picked a side, and look, it makes me question his reporting, and so that's the situation we're in now. So now, is he just leaking things that he gets, and no matter what? In which case, I would respect that, or is he selectively leaking based on his political motives? Now that suspicion is out there and it's real and it's possible, well, now I'm concerned that it can't be trusted.
So yeah, there's the clip. We've played that before on the show, and not to defend Cenk Uygur, who's not my favorite commentator, but the reason why Jimmy does have to go back to like 2017 or whatever to find this clip is because Cenk no longer holds that position. He doesn't believe that about Julian Assange anymore. I think he defends Julian Assange now whenever they talk about him on TYT. So again, just to be fair to Cenk Uygur, I don't think that's his present day position on the subject matter. But that being said, that doesn't make the clip itself any less cringy. It is super cringy. It's clearly just a smear of Julian Assange coming from someone that's been watching too much MSNBC style coverage. But just wanted to clarify. Ultimately, my thought about this whole Twitter beef and in general, the whole Cenk Uygur versus Jimmy Dore back and forth is that it's getting pretty played out. I really think it's getting pretty played out. And honestly, both of these guys need to step it up. Their attacks against each other are so stale at this point. I feel like we've reacted to some iteration of this exchange like 13 times on the Vanguard. It seems like the same line over and over again. You're a fake leftist. Well, you smeared Julian Assange. Like it just goes back and forth and back and forth. They need to freshen this up a little bit, add some new ammo to their inventory, so to speak. Because this is getting pretty played out. Let's freshen up the discourse, guys.
Oh yeah, it's super stale. It's boring now at this point, which is why I don't know. I like it. Like it's funny in a couple of ways. Like, gosh, how many times does Cenk just have to like fucking jerk himself off by tweeting about like Jimmy and Glenn? It's like, okay, I get it. Like, whatever. But I just think it's hilarious too. It's like, okay, you can be critical of AOC for the fact that she literally did vote to send billions of dollars to the Ukraine, and also still think that Trump is like a fucking warmonger himself. He extrajudicially killed Qasem Soleimani, potentially risking war with another nuclear power. One of the main reasons that I always knew that Russiagate was bullshit was that he was doing a bunch of shit to escalate actually with Russia, doing just shit that they wouldn't like. While he was simultaneously being presented as Putin's puppet. So all of that shit was unclear. And Cenk, who went hook, line, and sinker down the Russiagate rabbit hole, just still has like a weird, like, I don't know, obsession with, dragging anybody that, kind of called that one more correctly. But then on the other hand, when you have Jimmy come in and it's just like, you didn't address anything about how he was pro-war. You didn't provide any evidence for that. You went and dragged up the same clip that you always play, which is him saying something that was pretty mildly critical of Julian Assange, which I massively disagree with. And I do think, was an MSNBC talking point, but it was just like always pro-war union buster and then you just completely something unrelated. Here's a clip of him saying something that I know will be red meat to my audience who is trained to get mad whenever they see this clip of Cenk. So yeah, I just thought that was strange.
Yeah, just the same old tired attack from both of them. As I said, they both need a new line. Like, come on, guys, let's freshen up the routine a little bit. You're going back to the hits too much. Like I said, I feel like we've probably reacted to some iteration of this exact exchange like 20 times on this show. So here we are doing it again for you guys. Hope you enjoyed the analysis. Sorry, I want to say analyzation, but no, analysis. I haven't seen Cenk respond yet to this from Jimmy. I don't think he probably will. But speaking of Cenk Uygur, did you see he got a little bit of a shout out last night on Tucker Carlson's show? This was fucking hilarious. I saw this last night.
Movement is that they're totally and utterly corrupt. Is anyone on the left pointing this out? Has Cenk Uygur said a word about it? The so-called radicals at Chapo Trap House? Movement is that they're totally and utterly corrupt. Is anyone on the left pointing this out? Has Cenk Uygur said a word about it? The so-called radicals at Chapo Trap House? Movement.
The so-called radicals at Chapo Trap House. I hope we get a shout out on Tucker Carlson at some point. The so-called radicals over at the Vanguard. But yeah, I thought that was pretty funny too.
Yeah, fucking hilarious. We'd only need to become 1 million times more relevant, and then I think we could maybe secure that bag at some point. Yeah, I thought it was hilarious. I did see a couple of really good responses from people that was like, LOL, who does Tucker think he's flexing on? All of his audience uses the Yahoo toolbar for their news. And just like, they don't even know who the fuck Chapo Trap House and YouTube is. But yeah, pretty funny though.
Yeah, definitely pretty funny stuff. Another story that I did want to talk about. This one's actually pretty serious, guys. So get ready for a pivot into the seriousness. Let's take a look here. This was actually pretty good news. Really good news reported by The Intercept. Activists acquitted in trial for taking piglets from Smithfield Foods. This happened on October 8th, so we're a little bit late to this, but I was just reading about this, and it's actually a crazy story. The nation's largest pork producer argued that the removal of 2 sick piglets was a cause of theft and burglary. DXE called it a rescue. And by the way, DXE is direct action everywhere. I have put a link to their page in the description if you guys want to check out more about what they do and some of the direct action initiatives they do, specifically combating the factory farming industry. So if you guys want to find out more about them and support them in any way, the link is in the description. But yeah, let's read a little bit about this because this was a historic trial, as The Intercept says. They say in a historic trial over the 2017 removal of 2 sick and dying piglets from Utah's Smithfield factory farms, 2 animal rights activists were acquitted by a jury Saturday night on burglary and theft charges, which could have sent them to prison for 5.5 years each for rescuing 2 dying piglets from a factory farm. The verdict is the culmination of a more than 5-year pursuit that multiple agencies, including the FBI and the Utah Attorney General's office, begun after the activists published undercover footage revealing gruesome conditions at Smithfield, the nation's largest pork producer. Members of the animal rights group Direct Action Everywhere, or DXE, removed 2 sick, severely underweight piglets from Smithfield in March 2017. They named the pigs Lily and Lizzie, brought them to receive veterinary care, and took them to a sanctuary for rescued farm animals in Colorado. Later that year, as The Intercept reported, the FBI chased the piglets across state lines and raided the sanctuary where they were living, bringing with them veterinarians who sliced off a piece of Lizzie's ear to perform a DNA test and confirm that she was the property of Smithfield Foods. The animals were not removed from the sanctuary and still live there to the day. So that's a win for sure. But it's crazy that the FBI literally devoted that sort of resources to tracking down 2 piglets. That's how concerned they are with corporate private property, that they'll literally chase down, activists who rescued these dying piglets from a factory farm, expending probably hundreds and hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars in the process to pursue this case on behalf of big agriculture and this disgusting factory farm. It says activists who traveled to St. George, Utah to watch the trial were jubilant over the decision, describing it as a turning point for the animal rights movement. They just let a guy who walked into a factory farm and took 2 piglets out without the consent of Smithfield walk out of the courtroom free. If it can happen in southern Utah, it can happen anywhere. Prosecutors allege that the baby pigs, who were barely a week old when the activists removed them, were worth $42.20 each, or $84 in total. The U.S.-based pork producer is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Hong Kong-based pork company WH Group, which reported $24 billion of revenue in 2019. The verdict is the first jury acquittal for DXE, which Hasung, sorry if I mispronounced that, co-founded in 2013. Going into the trial, they both faced counts of felony burglary, which each carry up to 5 years in prison, and 1 count of misdemeanor theft, which carries up to 6 months. One of the burglary charges was dismissed by the judge due to a lack of evidence. Smithfield has an enormous amount of financial interests that are wrapped up in this. They have an enormous amount to lose if this trial becomes public, and they cannot afford, or maybe they think they cannot afford, to give an inch to these people. So basically, luckily, these activists got acquitted. They were trying to throw them in jail for up to 5 years for rescuing 2 sick and dying piglets from a miserable factory farm condition. The real crazy thing is that these pigs were only valued at $42 each to this company. So basically, in this company's eyes, it was a burglary and a theft of $84. Can you imagine if any other business or some store had $84 worth of merchandise stolen from them? Can you imagine the fucking FBI getting involved, chasing the thieves across state lines, going to the place to cut off part of the pig's ear to do DNA tests, expending thousands of dollars of taxpayer property in the pursuit of $84 in stolen property?
Well, I mean, it all goes back to why are they doing this, right? It's to send a message of fear, right? It is to deliberately make it so that other activists are afraid of doing this. And yeah, it's horrible the way that they treat these animals. And look, I mean, I literally just got back from the vet with my dog hours ago. You can't imagine the way that they would be, treating pigs, which, a lot of people will argue are just as intelligent and emotionally equipped as dogs. So in your mind, that will really fuck you when you start to think about that. And then, for it to be $84, that it just means that they're more interested in sending a message. They're more interesting, and that's so fucked up that's what our government prioritizes, but that's what they're paid to prioritize by the lobbyists from the big agriculture. They are paid to in the form of campaign contributions to ensure that this is the priority for them, making sure that people don't understand the horrors of animal industrial agriculture, and that they don't understand and that way they can keep kind of consuming it in the dark.
Absolutely. And as this commenter points out, private companies, which aren't even American companies, this is a subsidiary of a Hong Kong based company, are controlling the legal system and basically using the FBI as their goons to chase down and prosecute activists for exposing the conditions in their own facilities. Speaking of conditions in the facilities, let's take a listen here. In 2017, Utah investigated the company's pledge to stop using gestation crates, which confine pregnant pigs to cages too small to let them turn around. But when activists arrived at the massive facility, they found it filled with rows of pregnant pigs caged in the crates the company had sworn off. So the company lied. That should be illegal. They should be charged or investigated in some sort for that. They also entered a facility packed with farrowing crates, similar to gestation crates, but with just enough additional room to fit nursing piglets, where female pigs are moved when they're ready to give birth. The group found dead and rotting piglets inside the facility, as well as visibly ill and injured ones like Lily and Lizzie. So obviously that's just heartbreaking. But also it's like, don't we have, like, how is this even fucking legal? How is this even fucking legal? Don't we have laws about animal cruelty? If I decided to torture a dog or like throw a dog off a building or something, that would be illegal, and I could easily be charged for that if I was found out. But if you're a massive company and you're profiting to the tune of $28 billion a year off of this torture and just slaughter, then somehow it's okay. And not only is it okay, but you can get the FBI to go after the people that are trying to expose your crimes. Think about how fucked up that is.
I mean, yeah, and that's what money does in this country, right? It'll just, lead to the most fucking depraved exploitation, in this case, of just innocent animals. Like, the guy says he was, they're just struggling, like the little babies. Like, I don't know. It's just, it's hard to read even, because none of us want to think about that. None of us want to think about the suffering that's being imposed on these little creatures that are so helpless and, have not chosen to live in this fucked world that we've created. I don't know. Yeah, it's very, emotional, right? Even though, that it feels like we're powerless, because that's a lot of people are pointing out in that chat. It's just like, we haven't really made a lot of progress on this issue over the years. Like, I remember my whole life, we've talked a lot about factory farming and how disgusting it is, but it doesn't seem like legislatively there have been a whole lot of actions, at least that I've seen, Gavin, from any politician. Despite the fact that we all kind of agree this is horrible, there's been no movement, no rhetoric at all. Actually, the one time I did see movement on that was just from a politician was Dr. Oz talking about how we should just eliminate subsidies for food. That way it's $90 for cheeseburgers and people just eat less of them. And it was just like, no, that's like, but that's they're just going to treat all of the animals like shit and then sell them to rich people anyway. Yeah.
Plus, Dr. Oz doesn't have a great track record on animal abuse himself.
No shit. The fucking dogs. I can't even believe that. How is that not disqualifying? We didn't even bring that up. I don't even want to think about that. But how is that not? How could you ever in your life vote for somebody that did that?
Yeah, it's truly disgusting. But again, luckily, we do have a little bit of good news, which is that these activists were acquitted. Basically, the case they made was that their rescuing of these piglets from this farm and this conditions they were in was similar to how, it's legal to break a window and free a dog. If you see a dog in a hot car that's dying, it's not illegal to free that dog. And they basically made the case that what they did was similar to that, and that these pigs were going to die. They were suffering and dying, and they literally just saved their life. These pigs they wouldn't have made this company even the $84 because they were just going to die. They just would have been thrown in the fucking dumpster. So these people heroically saved their lives. And as I said, I did link in the description box to DXE, which is their website, Support the Right to Rescue, so you guys can find out more about this case and find out how to support these heroic activists if you're interested in doing that. I'm just learning about this case now. Actually, I read about it this morning. Actually, a patron of ours sent us a message about this, and I was really moved by this story and the heroic activism on the part of DXE. So yeah, check them out in the description if you guys are interested in finding out more. But again, at least the good news is they were acquitted, and at least for those two little piglets, they are still alive and well, living at that animal sanctuary. So a little bit of good news for you guys.
Yeah, nice. A little light at the end of that tunnel. And yes, shout out to you, Alex. Excuse me, George. Have a good weekend. You too, George.
Yeah, thanks, George. Really appreciate that, man. You have a good weekend as well.
And I was going to say that I do kind of relate to Alex over here in his super chat. I'm a Midwesterner. He's like, wish I could be a vegetarian, but I like burgers and chicken fingers, but I still think murder of animals is hard to think about. And I think that's where a lot of people on the internet, unfortunately, just wind up, where it's just like, hey, Alex is saying the quiet part out loud. Like, this is really fucked and I don't want to think about it, but like, oh gosh, they've set up our society in such a way where I am like driven to consume these things. So for me, Alex, and this isn't a perfect solution, and I'm certainly not perfect at any of this, but instead of ever thinking about just going full on vegetarian, I just have consciously tried to consume less meat. A lot of people will tell you that that's inadequate, and that it is probably inadequate. I think most things will be until we have a systemic response, which is why I'm bummed there's been no legislation to get behind, because that would be something that I think we could all kind of get behind. Like, hey, how do we rethink this in a way that makes it so we are not mass factory farming animals, and that we can readjust our food system to sustain us more and more off of non-animal byproducts, as we over time change our culture and diet to eliminate animal consumption. But that would take a large amount of effort from actual governance, and we haven't, like I said, seen any motion on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Obviously, I totally understand where you're coming from, Alex. And I think a lot of people are in that spot too. That's the position I was in for many years before I did become vegetarian, where I was also a big fan of eating meat, but I always felt bad about it. Eventually, I did become a vegetarian, and I still do love burgers. They're just veggie burgers now. And luckily for us vegetarians, there have been a lot of progress in the plant-based meat arena. So like you can actually get really, really solid veggie burgers. People have this idea of veggie burgers being like full of nuts and roots and just this cheap facsimile of what a burger is. But with modern day technology, they've actually made veggie burgers that taste really meaty, that actually have that same kind of experience and can replicate it. Now, I'm sure a beef enthusiast would say otherwise, but as someone that hasn't eaten actual meat in a while, it's pretty good. And so I would say that, as Zach said, even if you don't become a straight up vegetarian, you can limit the amount of meat you eat. You can try to get it from more ethical sources like family farms, for example, rather than supporting massive corporate conglomerates like Tyson, which do literally just torture their animals with absolutely no regard for their well-being. So there are ways you can improve that if you want to. But as Zach said, there's only so much that individual choices will get us. What we really need is systemic change. What we really need is to abolish the system of factory farming specifically, and outlaw some of these incredibly cruel practices like the gestation crates, which were mentioned and which many countries have banned because they can't, these female pigs, these sows literally can't even turn over. They literally can't move at all. So those have been outlawed in some countries and in some states. So, there is some legislation which has tried to combat the just evil of factory farming. Hopefully we see more of that. And obviously, in the meantime, there's only so much you can do, but, there are ways to limit your consumption of animal products that do make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to you, Alex. Really appreciate the super chat. And as always, appreciate regular of the show, Adi the bug catcher, as well. Had to step away for 30 minutes on a call, but great to come back to see you guys talking about animal rights again. For anyone looking to get more involved with animal rights, ASPCA is a great place. So shout out to you, Adi the bug catcher, and shout out to the ASPCA.
Yeah, shout out to you, Adi. Thanks so much once again for the super chat. And yeah, thanks for letting us know about that as well. The the ASPCA is also a great resource to donate to if you're interested in that sort of thing. So really appreciate you chiming in, Adi. Thank you so much for the super chat.
Gavin, did you have a stroke? Oh my gosh, you can't never run for political office again. I was making a joke about how you just John Fetterman, whenever he says the wrong thing, he said ASCA, and I was like, no, here you go. Now you can't run for office anymore.
Oh yeah, you guys know that I fuck up my speech all the time.
That's
on
what,
this. Like I am notorious for saying the wrong phrase. Like the other, I always say right. What's the phrase? It's right off the bat and right out of the gate. I always say right off the gate or right out of the bat. I fuck up phrases like that so much. If you guys are longtime listeners of the show, you guys know that I butcher idioms and phrases like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say my thing that I do all the time is it'll be like a close word, and I'll just like say whatever is like rolling off the tip of my tongue, like incoherence instead of like, yeah, I don't know, fucking something else. But either way, it was just baffling that was the disqualifier. Anyway, I was just making a joke because it happened midstream to us, and we are not stroke victims. And also probably not, cognitively sound enough to run for office in my case.
Yeah, Zach smoked too much weed to run for office.
It's like Chance the Rapper said, burn too many brain cells down to be worried about my brain cells now.
Absolutely. But thank you so much, Adi. Really appreciate that. Thank you also, M. Meal, for the 420. Speaking of weed, 420. Really appreciate that, M. Meal. Thanks for being on Twitter so I don't have to. Yeah, that's kind of the premise of our show, right? If you don't want to have to, I don't even recommend anyone has a Twitter, by the way. Twitter is a terrible place. It's an addictive app. It's one of those things where you're just like, oops, why the fuck did I just spend an hour scrolling Twitter? My life is no better for it. And now I'm depressed because I heard about every terrible thing going on everywhere in the world. So if you guys don't want to have Twitter, I totally understand that. Sometimes I wish I could delete my Twitter, but I can't really do that because it's a big foundation of what we comment on this show. But we're happy to do it for you guys. That way you don't have to suffer through wading through the trenches of Twitter.
Yeah, I don't think either of us either, unless you've reinstalled it. I don't have like Twitter on my phone. Like I forced myself to read it like a grandpa on my laptop just so I like fucking like, scroll it like, oh, I got to do my work this morning. Let's go through the fucking
Yeah, I'm sad to say that although I also deleted it on my phone, now I just go to the Chrome app and I still look at it on my phone, just not on the app on the desktop on my phone. So yeah, it's an addictive motherfucker.
You can only play so many games with yourself.
Exactly. But yeah, thank you so much, Emil. Really appreciate that. And also, wow, thank you once again, Boeing 757. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate that generous $50 super chat. Damn, thank you so much for reporting and intelligent comments. I know that Wayne and Paul I know both Wayne and Paul from my own activism when I started flying out of San Francisco. Both drove me to study animal liberation and then adopt a vegan lifestyle. Wow, that's crazy, man. I had no idea about that. Are Wayne and Paul are the two activists that were that they removed the piglets. Wow, that's crazy, man. You actually know those guys? That's awesome. We'd love to have them on the show, obviously, if we are ever able to get in touch with them and talk about that activism that they do. But that's really cool, Boeing, that you actually know those guys.
Yeah, that's insane. And yeah, I hope, obviously, wishing them nothing but the best over here at the Vanguard. Obviously, it's tumultuous to go through a trial like that. They were risking 5.5 years of their lives in a concrete box, exposing themselves to untold new traumas there, all kinds of stuff just to liberate these animals. So yeah, really, that's some intense comrade shit right there. Some solidarity with those animals that those guys had. So that was really great shit. And yeah, I'd love to talk to them. That's really awesome that you guys know each other.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. Thanks so much for letting us know about that, Boeing, and we really appreciate that really generous super chat. That's so supportive. So thank you, man. And we also got another super chat from David. Thank you so much, David. Thank you for your passion for animals, Gavin. What do you both think about the fact that animal rights are left out of political campaigns media? It's unfortunate, David. It really is. And I think there's a couple reasons why. For one, I just think that unfortunately politicians there's the money, the corporate corruption from the donations that these people get from big ag and big animal agriculture. But also, I just think that unfortunately, a lot of politicians are afraid to take this stance of animal liberation because if you think about it, the majority of the voters that they need to get elected eat meat. So they probably just look at that and say, well, this isn't going to be a popular issue because 80% of the constituents I have are meat eaters. So therefore, it's better just to not talk about it, which again is unfortunate and it's cowardly. But that's how politics works, right? You got to lean into the more popular issues, and they just don't really view this as a popular issue. So unfortunately, hopefully we can change that, but I think that is the way it is right now.
Yeah, I also think that for Democrats who would be interested in, so say like take somebody like Bernie Sanders. One of the things that I think Bernie Sanders is shit scared of is being portrayed as a guy who only wants rich people to have meat, and that he's like really not. He's fake working class, like Two House Bernie. Wants to make the price of cheeseburgers $80 so that only him and his Washington cronies can eat them, and you and your family, can't afford bacon at the grocery store, and all this kind of shit that Tucker Carlson will start to run ads about. So even if it was like a good-natured candidate to move that forward, I think you're going to have to walk through that and really deal with it and grapple with that, which is something Gavin and I've talked about on the show a lot in the past. Like, how do you start to get that going in a way that's not just massively classist, because the one way we know how to constrain things in this country is to make it cost prohibitive, but that's bullshit. Like, I don't want only rich people to fucking get their protein from meat and everybody else just, not have the option. I would rather us all massively reduce our meat consumption together, and then, find like some equitable way for the portion of the population that did, for cultural reasons want to continue to, and at times responsibly consume meat. Give them that opportunity without like a massive cost barrier where it's just like Bill Gates, eating while the rest of us have like, insects and whatever. And I'm not even, I know it's a hot take on the left to say this. I'm actually not opposed to eating insects as like a form of like human sustenance. But I know that, but I also know the like class elements of that people get really worried about.
Have you ever eaten bugs before?
Oh yeah, I've had them like both just like straight up crispy fried like bugs on a stick, but I've also had them how they're more traditionally would be adopted into the diet, which they take them and they're just like turned into like a meal. So I've had it done with like crickets and grasshoppers. I've also had it done with like dried mealworms. I've tried all this shit.
Hell yeah, bro. I mean, at least walking the walk, right? I guess that's cool. I personally don't find that very appetizing, but I know that some cultures do. Eat insects, so no judgment. I just, personally,
I feel like you don't eat meat anyway. Like, I just feel like it's a more responsible way to get like.
But I can still, even as a vegetarian, I can still be like, yeah, that bacon smells good, or like that pork chop looks good. Versus like if I see like a grasshopper, I'm not like, yum, delicious. So yeah, but it is definitely like a more ethical. Just from I don't know about ethical, because I don't know if insects feel pain and have like emotions or whatever like animals do. I don't know enough about that, so I'd be interested in learning more. But I know it's better for the environment. So anyway, and also if you think about it, the meat eating caste system or whatever is already super elitist. Bill Gates or whatever, he's fucking eating Wagyu beef. Poor people are eating Oscar Mayer wieners. Like, there's already a massive class divide in the way we consume meat as a society. So that's also worth pointing out. But yeah, thank you, David.
Yeah, shout out to you, David. And shout out to you, George, as well. I'm not one of them, but there'd be a lot more vegans if we had to kill animals and butcher them for food ourselves. Love burgers, though. Yeah, that's exactly how my sister found her path to like, not eating meat. Was she was a vegan at one point. I don't think she is anymore, but I don't think she eats meat at all still. But yeah, just was like, oh, I could never kill a chicken. I could never like go outside and hunt anything. I would never do it. You could put a gun in my hand and tell me that all I had to do was like kill it. I just would never do it. And so she was like, therefore, like, I'm not just gonna like go to the fucking grocery store and buy some slaughtered meat. And I was like, yeah, it's tough to argue with that. And she was like, do you think you could kill a pig? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't ask myself those fucking questions because I don't want to like she was like, just imagine it looking at you and you just see Malcolm looking back. And I'm like, shut up. Don't say something like that to me. Like,
yeah, no, it is a good way to look at it though. Like, if you're gonna eat meat, and that's why I do respect like hunters a lot and people that have family farms. Like, if you're going to make the decision to eat meat, I do think it is a lot more ethical to actually confront what that is and the process of doing it, instead of just outsourcing it to some faraway factory that you'll never have any insight to the conditions of. Raise the animal and then confront the act of killing it if you're want to eat it. I think that's a very ethical way to go about it. And again, I don't necessarily have a problem with like the concept of humans eating meat. If you go hunting or something, that humans have been eating meat since the beginning of fucking time. I don't think there's really any denying that. My problem is more of like the factory farming aspect and the capitalization, the commercialization and corporatization of the industry. But yeah, if you're like, hunting or something, like I don't think that's nearly as problematic in my opinion. But thank you so much, George. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much for the super chat. And thank you also, Adi the Bug Catcher, so much for the $50 super chat. Thank you so much, Adi. This is becoming a tradition now. Get yourself some vegan Miserwat and Injera tonight. Also, great to see so many fellow vegans in the chat. Yeah, we're fostering a nice little community of vegans and vegetarians here. So that's pretty cool. And thank you so much, Adi. I will absolutely do that. There's a great Ethiopian restaurant that's like 5 minutes from our house in the River Market. I think it's called the Blue Nile. I go there like, at least every other week. And they have great Miserwat. So I'll definitely be hitting them up. Thanks to you, Adi. Really appreciate that, man.
Yeah, and while we're shouting out all of our favorite Ethiopian joints, there's another one in Midtown Kansas City called Misab, and they also have an insanely good Miserwat in Injera. And I know there's one more that you've been telling me about that we need to go to, that you used to go when you were a kid, but we haven't been yet. So maybe we'll go to that one. Shout out to you, Adi, though. Yeah, feeding us well on this Ethiopian cuisine.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adi. We really can't express how grateful we are for your generosity. And yeah, the Elsa's is the name of that one in downtown Overland Park. Easily the best Ethiopian food I've ever had. I look forward to going back there. Unfortunately, now we don't live very close to Elsa's, but the next time we're in downtown OP, 100% got to hit up Elsa's. Shout out to Elsa's, best Ethiopian cuisine in the Kansas City Metro. But thank you so much, Adi. Really, really appreciate that, man. And also thank you, Renzo, for the 199. So is the new Italian PM really a fascist? I don't know a ton about the situation in Italy, but from what I heard, she literally has like sympathized with like Mussolini and like actual fascists and has expressed, sympathies with those kind of characters and their ideologies. So I think it's probably fair to characterize her as a fascist. Although again, I'm not an expert in their geopolitical situation.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say she's documented as being a fascist sympathizer, which I know was like the fucking Hillary Clinton camp term for anybody who didn't vote for her in 2016. So it's funny, but that's that would be what I would say is like the best description that I would have for her. But I don't follow Italian politics that closely. It's one of the European countries I probably follow the least, unfortunately, politically. So I don't. That's why we haven't made a lot of content about it. It's like I've seen some shit on Twitter. I've seen some cringy stuff that she said, but I don't know enough about the ins and outs of their political situation.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you, Renzo, for the question. Really appreciate it. Maybe we'll do a segment on that in the near future. And thank you also, Christina, for the $4.99. Dairy is another good thing to give up for humane reasons. Absolutely. 100% it is, Christina. And as I said, I'm a vegetarian right now, not a vegan. Maybe at some point I'll try to go back to being a vegan. But that's why I personally, even though I don't eat meat, that's why I don't judge anyone that does eat meat, is because I also eat animal products. I eat butter and dairy and eggs. So I can't really judge anyone either, because unfortunately I also participate in the exploitation of animals. And again, that's something I would like to change going forward. But yeah, you're 100% right, Christina.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if you watch some videos about how they treat, factory farmed milk and how they make it, it is really fucked up. It's almost just as bad as what they do to, the animals they slaughter. Sometimes it's even worse because they have to like prolong their lives and of just suffering. So.
Yeah, it's really horrible. But anyway, I think that probably is about the end of our segment on animal rights. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about that story. Again, shout out to DXE, Direct Action Everywhere, doing great work, such heroic activism. And also shout out to our patron who notified me about this story in the first place. Really appreciate it. So yeah, thank you, Christina, for the super chat. And let's move on. I think we have one more story that we wanted to talk a little bit about today.
Rogan.
Yeah, involving Joe Rogan. So you guys know that Tulsi Gabbard was recently on the Joe Rogan Experience. And here's a clip of them agreeing that Ron DeSantis is more reasonable than anything you see on the left. So let's take a quick listen here.
Ron DeSantis, who seems to be like the most reasonable amongst the potential candidates. He seems to be, a pretty no nonsense guy, not without his flaws, but he's more reasonable than anything that I'm seeing on the left.
Yeah. It's well documented that the Iran deal flushed them with cash. They're saber rattling in terms of doing ballistic missile tests, which the Obama administration basically let him get away with. I think NSC advisor Flynn stated
So there's a clip of Ron DeSantis warmongering against Iran, but the real important part is just Joe Rogan saying, "Yeah, Ron DeSantis, that guy seems pretty reasonable, huh? You know, he's the most reasonable option." Sitting right across from noted anti-war voice Tulsi Gabbard, who fails to push back on that, and as Ben Norton pointed out, Ron DeSantis tried to make boycotting apartheid Israel illegal in Florida. There's the anti-BDS legislation. He pushes for war on China and Iran. He strongly backed the U.S. coup attempts in Venezuela and Nicaragua, and also supports the blockade of Cuba. So again, it's one thing, you don't have to push back on everything that someone you're talking with says. I understand if you're on Joe Rogan's show, you can't get into a debate every 5 minutes if he says something you disagree with. But still, for someone who really likes to sell herself as an anti-war person, it is pretty funny that she didn't offer any pushback or bring up any of these policy positions that Ron DeSantis holds when she heard Joe Rogan say that about him.
Yeah, and she also has herself just parroted that same thing. I'm almost positive I've heard her, kind of say. I'm struggling to think of a specific example. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought I've heard her say relatively positive things about Ron DeSantis herself in the past. And like I said, there's all kinds of just like inconsistencies with Tulsi's like so-called political evolution, right? I don't know. It just does seem rather odd that somebody who was a congressperson who ran on basically everything that Ron DeSantis did not run on, right? When she ran for president, she ran on a Green New Deal type of a climate change action. Basically just knock off Bernie, like slightly more aimed at gun-toting Republicans than Bernie. But essentially just a diet version of his plans. And then to turn around and just nod your head along as like Ron DeSantis is characterized as like some reasonable Joe. Like she knows what Ron DeSantis is responsible for. Just very, I don't know, just very indicative of the fact that she's just trying to like curry that new audience, that Joe Rogan audience that, we like Ron DeSantis. We're the populist right. We like Tucker, but we're still like new age and modern. I don't know. It's just like this new lane. And she's going head first for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So pretty revealing stuff here. And it is always funny when someone like Joe Rogan, it seems like he really likes DeSantis because of the COVID stuff and the fact that COVID had that DeSantis had a more hands-off approach to the coronavirus pandemic. He didn't really shut down much of Florida, and Joe Rogan clearly thought that was the correct policy. But it seems like that's basically like the one area where he really aligns with him, because there's a bunch of other policies that Ron DeSantis supports that fly directly in the face of all of Joe Rogan's supposed viewpoints about freedom, about legalizing cannabis, about abortion and stuff like that Joe Rogan has been fairly consistent on throughout his career as a commentator or a podcaster. So it really just seems like he's so hung up on the lockdown thing, and that's the sole reason why he supports DeSantis, which again, I guess if that's the most important issue to you, if that's all you care about, then sure, vote for DeSantis. But as far as I know, there's no lockdowns going on anymore. There's no freaking mask mandates or vaccine mandates or lockdowns of any form happening now or in the near future. So if you're voting on something from that hasn't been relevant in the 2 years and won't have been relevant in like 4 years come the election, then maybe you should update your priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. Joe Rogan also has just fucking been like a weird like spiral of right-wing talking points. So this is just the cherry on top. Obviously, the other day people were roasting him for falling for that obviously fake litter box story, which is like the most like boomer Facebook kind of easily debunked kind of a story. So anyway, we can play that clip really quickly, just so everybody knows this is not a drill. But yeah, this is the kind of shit that my grandma would share off from like freedom.eagle.org on Facebook and think it's real.
Kids, ready for this? My friend, his wife is a school teacher, and she works at a school that had to install a litter box in the girls' room because there is a girl who's a furry who identifies as an animal, and her mother badgered the school until they agreed to put a litter box in one of the stalls. Yeah. So this girl goes into the litter room or to the girls' room, and urinates or whatever. I don't know if she poops in it. That's pretty gross. Yeah, I mean, like if you could teach your cat, by the way, here's the thing. If you could teach your cat to use the toilet, you would.
There's 0% chance that happened. I'm sorry, but there is absolutely 0% chance that that happened. And this is a right-wing lie, which has been spread by a lot of influencers and politicians on the right wing. It's basically been debunked at every level. I don't think there's a single school that's ever been found out to have installed a fucking litter box. But as it says here, there's 20 politicians actually who falsely claimed this year alone that schools are accommodating kids who identify as cats, putting litter boxes on campus for them. Lauren Boebert, unsurprisingly, got in on that. Heidi Ganal said that. Marjorie Taylor Greene obviously said that. So this is just like this right-wing lie that keeps getting repeated. And then some dumbass like Joe Rogan hears it and then spins it into his own story. I have a friend whose wife's kid's husband said that the school they worked at, they were installing litter boxes for kids that identified as animals. Isn't that crazy? And then Tulsi Gabbard sitting across from him goes, "Wow, yeah, that's wild, man. Can you believe the state of the modern day left? What are we doing, man? That's so crazy." And this is just how it just keeps going on and on and on without ever being fact checked, even though it's clearly fake news.
Yeah, obviously. It's the most obviously fake thing ever. And here's why Joe Rogan is such a boomer. He doesn't give himself any outs. He's like, my friend's wife works at this school. It's like, oh, does she? Does she, Joe? No, you just wanted to push some anti-trans propaganda that you saw across your fucking phone when you were taking a shit this morning. You were like, oh, yeah, that happened to my homie. These crazy lefties, right? Like, he's just such a boomer at this point. It's insane. I mean, I honestly don't know if I've changed just so much since I used to like actually enjoy his show. And I used to go to bat for him, and I'd be like, oh, he's not that bad. He's like a good guy, I think. And now I just listen to him, and I'm like, no, you are just like kind of a dumbass. If you like, I either have to believe that you are so fucking dumb that you actually fell for that, and then somehow like your homie lied to you and convinced you that his wife did work at that place, or the more likely situation, which is that you're not quite that dumb, and you just did it because you were like, oh, this will be something crazy that I can tell Tulsi that'll get us on a nice like fucking anti-trans rant for a little bit, talk about how crazy and deranged the liberals are, and then that'll kind of get off my audience.
Yeah, and it's just obvious. It's just so obviously a lie. Like, even the most woke liberal school ever is not going to put a fucking litter box in the bathroom for a kid to go. How would that even work? You just see a kid crouching in the corner taking a shit in a litter box. Like, obviously that's not true. Come on, man. Like, stop being a fucking idiot.
I don't know, man. Paul X BSOG says he saw Bigfoot at school telling kids to be Democrats. So, I mean, the left will stop at nothing.
That's pretty funny. Thanks for that, Paul. And also thank you so much for the super chat. Christian999, really appreciate the $2. Down in Miami catching hell. King DeSantis sucks. Yeah, that's tough, man. He's quite a guy. He's so whiny though. I don't even understand his popularity because he's so fucking whiny. If you ever listen to a clip of him talking, he's like, he sounds like a South Park character. Like, he doesn't. At least Trump had a more like powerful presence and voice, for as stupid and clownish as Trump was. He has way more like charisma than DeSantis, in my opinion. DeSantis is just such a whiny fucking brat.
Dude, he is, and that's why I don't know if he'll be I'm really interested to see him go toe to toe with Trump in like a Republican debate. That'll be the day if he can figure it out. Because sometimes he just tries to be Trump, and then sometimes he talks shit on Trump. It's very interesting. Trump also wasn't in 2020. The dude had fallen a lot from his 2016 self. I don't know. Maybe they get his dosage right. This time around, they put him back up there, and he's on speed to all shit, and just going crazy on the debate stage. It'll be interesting to see which one of them, is able to be the alpha male. I imagine it'll still probably be Trump, but DeSantis has a big following. Maybe he'll figure it out. And shout out to you for kicking it down in Miami. Gavin and I need to go on vacation to Miami here soon.
Yeah, that'd be dope. So thank you so much, Christian. Really appreciate it. And thank you, High Anxiety, for the $1.99 too. DeSantis has just a few flaws. Yeah, just a few. A couple that we want, not even worth mentioning them. Just no one's perfect, man. Come on, bro. No one's perfect. Just a few flaws. Yeah, even though you can. Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for the super chat.
But he makes mistakes, right? Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect. Just like some like it hot. Anyway, thank you so much, Christina, for the $9.99. Really appreciate that. I missed the beginning of the show talking about Cenk and Jimmy. I'm calling today's show Spill the Tea Friday. Have a great weekend. Yeah, our segment on Jimmy and Cenk was pretty short because there just wasn't much to discuss. It was just kind of the same old beef that they always do, same back and forth that we've covered a million times. So yeah, there wasn't much to break down there, but appreciate you chiming in with another super chat, Christina. And that is a apt name for our show, Spill the Tea Friday. Thanks so much, Christina, and have a great weekend too.
Yeah, don't copyright that, Christina. We might steal that one. Just tea guard after all. Spill the tea guard. Anyway, take it easy, Christina. Always good to see you in the chat. Yeah, the litter thing is an obvious lie, obvious to us on the left, but I wonder if moderates of center left folks are buying it. I think some of them are, and that's really scary. I wouldn't be surprised if some fucking poor bastards actually were gullible enough to believe this. A lot of people just believe anything that Joe Rogan says. So definitely there are people out here that took this as true. Even people who wouldn't have been like maybe the most like fringe Republican followers. But I'd like to believe that most people that hear that are like, oh, fuck, that's definitely not true.
Hopefully, man. But yeah, there's a segment of the population that's just very vulnerable to this kind of misinformation. And if they see it on Facebook or hear it from Joe Rogan, they'll just be like, wow, that's so crazy. The left, man, letting kids poop in litter boxes. That's wild, bro. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if people do believe it, unfortunately. Thank you, Audie the Bug Catcher, for the $10. Really appreciate it as always. And thank you also, MX Row, for the $1.99. Good coverage. Well, thank you. Really appreciate it. Glad that we kept you entertained. Hopefully kept you informed, and appreciate the super chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to you, MX Row. We appreciate it. And shout out to you, Alex. I went to the new school for a year, which is one of the most leftist schools in the country last year. 0 litter boxes. Yeah. Where is the new school? That's in New York City, right? It's like a college, I think. Anyway.
Were you indoctrinated by groomer transgender teachers, Alex? Is that what happened at this institution of learning? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, of course there were no litter boxes. That's ridiculous. That's fucking ridiculous. Anyone that believes that is very vulnerable to misinformation, to put it nicely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Why isn't YouTube letting me send super chats? Weird. They're censoring you, man. That's crazy. Who knows why? Hopefully that's not happening to other people too. Interesting. I don't know why that would be happening, Zach.
Yeah, I have no idea either. YouTube trying to take us down, that censor us. They don't want any more tea spilled. They don't want us to be the only truth tellers on the internet. Oh, well.
We are the only truth tellers. We're the only ones keeping it real. 100%. As TJ Kirk once said, every channel with less subscribers than us is a fucking joke, and every channel with more subscribers than us is a fucking sellout. We're the only ones keeping it real here at the Vanguard.
Amen. Amen. Love that energy. That's the energy that I like to bring to this show. I think that just about wraps us for the day, unless there was anything else you wanted to talk about, Gavin. Thought we had a great fucking conversation today. 5 for 5 this week. Gavin and I are probably going to take the day off tomorrow. But we'll be back at it like some crack addicts later on next week. So yeah, appreciate everybody for being in the chat, and shout out to you, Alex. It was kind of cringe, but it had a few great professors, and yeah, in Greenwich Village, New York. Yeah, I just Googled it. That's where James Baldwin went to college. So anyway.
Hell yeah, sounds like a good school. Well, thanks so much, Alex, for the super chat. And we might actually be chatting with our friend of the show, Manny, tomorrow, if you're available during the afternoon. Are you not going to be available, Zach?
No, remember I have that Lit on Grand event.
Gotcha. We'll have to figure out a different date then to chat with our good friend Manny. But anyway, thank you so much, Alex. And yeah, we'll probably take a day off tomorrow. But we'll see you guys in the near future. Also, thank you so much, Christina, for the $4.99. I was thinking of calling you the tea guard, and yes, you can trademark it. Yeah, we do. We do like to spill the tea here at the Vanguard. You guys know what you come here for, and it's that hot tea. So thank you so much, Christina. We always appreciate your comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, for Halloween, Gavin and I can just come dressed in officiating outfits, and we'll just be like the tea guard, drinking tea guard, be meta.
And also, yeah, I can understand this. I like Joe Rogan when he's not talking about politics. Like he does some great interviews. One of my favorite interviews of Joe Rogan's is actually of Rob Zombie, who's one of my favorite filmmakers. He did an interview with Rob Zombie like a year or two ago, and I thought that was a great conversation. He's a really talented conversationalist, and as long as they're not talking about politics, if they're talking about MMA or aliens or movies or music or something like that, I have no issue with him. I think he's a great conversationist. Like I said, I can understand his appeal. It's just, goddamn, his politics are getting so cringy at this point, and unfortunately, a lot of people do, listen to him and take what he has to say on that subject matter seriously. So that's why we're, kind of pushing back on some of the bullshit. But I can definitely understand why you enjoy the Joe Rogan experience.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I that was what I was talking about. I was like, have I changed so much that this has become just like unlistenable to me, or has it radically accelerated in the amount of like fucking, just boomer right-wing talking points being peddled to you? And yeah, of course, some of my favorite podcast episodes ever. Like I loved when he used to have Kevin Smith on the podcast every once in a while back in the day. I loved when Eddie Wong would go on the podcast back in the day. Some guys I really fuck with used to be not early ons, but like, back in the Joe Rogan, like 500s and 700s, like when I was like listening to it really often, I just felt like there was more just that kind of shit, and less like, oh, the trans kids. Oh my God, the trans kids and the woke and the trans kids. For a while though, that has been. He was really outraged about college campuses, and I remember that got really annoying back in like the 2016 era. And that's how he started having the Weinsteins on. Was, oh, this guy got kicked out of Evergreen State because anyway. So it's always been there, but yeah, I just feel like it's gotten harder to tune it out.
Yeah, that's very true. And yes, I did like The Munsters. It was a freaking masterpiece. Best movie of the year, hands down. No, but unironically, I did enjoy The Munsters movie. I thought it wasn't as bad as people said it was. Not a great movie, but, still a fun time. I'm a Rob Zombie apologist, though, so, take my opinion with a grain of salt. But yeah, I think that's just about our show for the day. Huge shout out to the patron community. As always, you guys know we like to start and end all of our live streams with a big old shout out to the patrons. Thank you guys so much for keeping us afloat, for supporting the show. If you guys watching are interested in supporting our content, supporting the work that we do, the link is going to be found in the description. If you'd like to hit up our patron community, become a patron, get your name on the shout out screen. There's also a PayPal link in the description if you'd prefer to support us that way. Really, really helps out. And also, if you guys aren't able to help out, we totally understand that, of course. All we ask is that you hit that like button. It's a great way to support the show 100% for free. But yeah, thanks so much for the support, patrons. You guys make the show possible.
Yeah, of course. You guys keep the wheels on our van going round and round, and we appreciate it. And yeah, shout out to all of you guys. It was a great fucking week of vanguarding.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate everyone for tuning in today. Thanks, Zach, for the comment. You guys rock, even when I don't agree. I enjoy listening to you guys. Well, we always appreciate your comments, Zach. Thank you so much, Adi, for the comments today. Great show, great discussion. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Adi. Really appreciate the super chats. Huge shout out to you, Boeing 757 pilot. We really appreciate your contributions today. Thank you, Christina, for the super chats. Thank you, Alex Khan. Thank you, everyone that supported us today and commented and hit that like button. It really, really helps out with what we're doing here. And we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, and shout out to Drew. I also think Gavin should get a flat top. Fucking go for it, dude.
Yeah, someday you guys are going to tune in and it's going to be a radically different Gavin.
Gavin with the fade and flat top. I'm ready for that era.
We should just switch hairstyles, but yeah, we'll see you guys later. Peace out.